Welcome to the seventh in this series of presentations that have been developed as part of the Plymouth College of Art and Atlantic Youth Creative Hub's Creative Entrepreneurs Business Incubation Programme. The programme was designed to support young creative entrepreneurs by providing the fundamental skills required to develop an idea, plan and start a business, and ultimately take their products or services to market. Through a series of workshops, events, and mentoring, participants increased their business knowledge, gained confidence to start a new business, and develop their professional practice. My name is Mark Cotton, and I've produced this series of presentations to capture and share the content of the AYCH workshops, creating a resource for future reference. Social impact is the positive effect on people and communities that happens as a result of social business. So, if you're setting up or already running a social enterprise, how do you know what impact you are looking for and when you've achieved it? Today, we will talk about the theory of change and using an outcomes-based approach to measuring and evidencing impact. There is no single definition of social impact. To give a few examples though, Unlimited define it as the social change that an organisation creates through its actions. The National Lottery Community Fund refer to it as any social effects arising from an intervention. And the Social Investment Business states social impact is the change, either positive or negative, that happens for people and communities as a result of an activity or service. The simplified version is just to say that social impact is the difference that you make to people or the planet as a result of what you do. And the reason social impact is so important to social enterprises is because it's what many funders, commissioners, investors are potentially seeking to buy from you. Social impact measurement is the process of providing evidence that you're doing something that provides a real and tangible benefit, whether that be to an individual, a geographic community, or a community of interest. So why do we need to measure this stuff, and why is it so important about the social difference that you and your business can make to people and the planet? At its core, impact measurement seeks to gather crucial information about an organisation's activities and use it to relate the overall change brought about to people's lives over a particular period of time. Evidence of impact offers value on four key fronts, represented by four primary audience segments. Firstly, and possibly most importantly, you and your business. The information coming out of social impact measurement should be geared toward outcomes that matter to you. This allows you to seek what works, identify where improvements can be made, and to learn from the results when making decisions about the future. Secondly, impact measurement provides a powerful tool for articulating and communicating what your organisation does for funders, investors, commissioners, donors, clients, and the general public. Thirdly, beneficiaries. Impact measurement can help beneficiaries understand the services, processes, and the outcomes that you offer, and to see the real benefits that accompany them. And finally, the sector, whichever sector that may be. As impact measurement and reporting spreads, it allows different organisations to communicate more effectively and share their results. Impact measurement is important so that we can know what has changed and to what extent, to benchmark and make comparisons, to learn and make improvements and test our assumptions, and to provide evidence of value for money, which can increase our own sustainability. And it's never too early to start thinking about impact, and the fundamental questions to be answered will essentially remain the same. Will we accomplish the change we set out to achieve? How will we know? What are the changes that will happen as a result of our work? And what unexpected or unplanned effects might our activity have on people or organisations or the environment? The basic principles of impact measurement are that you communicate clearly what you are trying to achieve, how you are working to achieve it, and the progress you've made so far. And the process of building a comprehensive picture of impact is divided into four key areas. Be clear about the outcomes you're seeking. Find a robust way to map your activities and measure your impact. And use the results by communicating what difference you've made. A useful tool to help shape thinking is something called the Charities Evaluation Service Planning Triangle, or the CES triangle. As you can see, the ultimate aim or vision is at the top of the triangle, describing in broad, general terms the change you want to see. Being realistic with your aim will help you identify realistic outcomes, which will indicate what needs to change and what differences you make. And using positive words when describing outcomes, such as more, better, or improved, will make it clear that you are aiming for a tangible benefit. In some cases, outcomes may involve keeping a situation stable or stopping things from getting worse. The bottom of the triangle is the place for the objectives. Having identified the changes you want to achieve, you can now plan how to make them happen. Objectives or outputs will bring about the changes that you will deliver. They are the core of the planning process, setting out what will happen, how it will happen, who will do it, and when. And objectives or outputs are best described using words of action to set out what you will actually do, such as provide, run, organize, or produce. So on the screen now, there's a worked example of a CES planning triangle for a social enterprise providing training and advice to young refugees. And as you can see, this clearly differentiates between outputs, outcomes, and the top level aims. When thinking about the wider context, though, it's worth considering these key points. What is the problem you are seeking to address? What is your value proposition? What is the scale of the problem? What are its causes? And how does it impact upon people's lives? How does your work relate to any government interventions or initiatives? What other organisations are tackling the problem or working with similar beneficiaries, and how do you relate or communicate with them? Is there the potential for collaboration, or is it more likely to be competition? In terms of broader trends, what are the larger developments you see happening in the coming years, or what are the risks and opportunities that they present? And it's important to know who your beneficiaries are and the specific needs you are trying to meet. A theory of change can be developed at the beginning of a piece of work to help with planning or to describe an existing piece of work so you can evaluate it. It's particularly helpful if you're planning or evaluating a complex initiative, but can also be used for more straightforward and simple projects. A theory of change usually consists of the vision or long-term aim, the high-level outcomes, either national or society level or community level, lower-level outcomes at a personal or a people level, and then activities or outputs, so the things that you do, and the enabling factors, or sometimes called the inputs, so the circumstances and behaviours surrounding your work. A good theory of change can help teams work together to achieve a shared understanding of a project and its aims. Using a theory of change to co-develop strategy fosters consensus and can sometimes motivate staff. It's also an agreed statement of what your organisation or project is trying to achieve and can give focus to your work. It can help determine what needs to be measured and also what does not need to be measured and provide a framework for the evidence you should collect. And the best theories of change are evidence-based and justified by up-to-date knowledge of what works. A theory of change diagram is a good way to summarize your work and communicate it to others, and can help bring the process of change to the forefront and encourage you to focus on the outcomes and articulate them more effectively. The final goal should describe the change you want to be seeing in the world and should be relatively long term, obviously beneficial, and something that funders, commissioners, or supporters can get behind. Once you've identified your final goal, you need to work backwards through the desired outcomes needed to achieve that goal. This can be understood as the changes experienced by people or society that will contribute to achieving the final goal. This is perhaps the most important part of the process. Too often, organisations jump straight from their activities to their final goals without thinking through the changes that need to happen in between. The outcomes must be clearly articulated within your theory of change and should be the things that your project can influence. Outcomes should be feasible. Given the scale of your activities, they should be short to medium term, but should link logically to your long-term goal. And they should ideally be supported by evidence. At this stage, it's important to not worry too much about how you will measure or evidence the impact. Your interventions should not be designed around what can be measured. Neither should your theory of change. Once you've established your final goal and intermediate or high level and lower level outcomes, you then need to consider what outputs or activities will make this change happen. Take each outcome in turn and think about how it links to your activities. Then you can begin to think about enablers. These are the conditions or the factors that need to be in place for the activities to work. Internal enablers are mostly within your control and describe how you deliver your work. So, for example, the quality of your services, the relationships that you have, and the values and attitudes of your staff. External enablers are often beyond your immediate control, and they describe the context in which you work, including social, cultural, economic, and political factors, and how you work with other organizations. Finally, you should consider the inputs that are required in order to support the delivery of the activities. What resources do you require? Staffing, funding, information, research, systems, processes, evidence, etc., etc. Once you begin to develop your theory of change, you will begin to see how some things will be dependent on others, where some things are responsible for others, and where some things might be indirectly responsible for one or more things in the chain. You can then start to add in lines of accountability and responsibility, defining which activities lead to which outcomes, which enabling factors have an impact on which activities, and what inputs support which activities. You can then continue to shape the theory of change until it is a fair reflection of your aims, outcomes, outputs, and activities. As you can see from this worked example for a supported housing project. And also this example from a complementary health clinic. And another, but this time from an arts organisation. Once you've developed your theory of change, you can start thinking about how to measure and evaluate it. A measurement framework built around your theory of change will ensure you collect information that tells you what difference you are making. In designing the framework, you'll need to decide what data to collect, the level of rigor of evidence you need, and how to go about collecting it. Building an effective measurement framework relies on several key components that need to work together. A solid foundation is essential and requires good leadership and buy-in from senior staff and a strong commitment to the value of impact measurement and the investment of time, energy, and skills. And the 4 pillars provide a coherent framework on which to base your measurement efforts and ensures your data collection is structured. It's important to prioritize the most important outcomes in your theory of change and focus on measuring those. To decide which outcomes to measure, ask yourself these 2 questions. Firstly, has anyone else already proved the causal link between outcomes in your theory of change? And if so, can you use this desk-based research to gather the evidence rather than collect new data? And secondly, is it really important for you to have data on this outcome? You need to prioritize the most important outcomes. Basing your measurement framework on your theory of change can help steer you in the right direction and avoid either underinvesting or overinvesting in measuring your impact. And using a range of approaches to tell the story can bring your impact to life. Different types of evidence can be combined to bolster your claims that what you do actually makes a difference. 2 key considerations. Who you collect data from should reflect the groups your organisation interacts with. The beneficiaries of a service, staff members, practitioners, using your resources, or policymakers you're trying to influence. And secondly, the type of data you collect is likely to be both quantitative, which helps you to determine where the change has taken place, and qualitative, which helps you to understand why and how. Quantitative data is aggregated evidence of the extent of the impact you're having, whilst the qualitative data, including case studies, is more effective in communicating the detail of what has or can be achieved and how. The data types are complementary, and it's wise to collect both types where possible. Indicators are the specific things within an impact measurement system that you take measurements of, and straightforward indicators around outputs tend to follow direct quantities. So, for example, the number of goods distributed or the number of people receiving a service. Good indicators are relevant, responsive to change, and not always producing the same result. They're specific, but they're also consistent and form a reliable basis for comparison with past performance, and also with other organizations where possible. And they should be practical, simple, and cheap to use. So now that you have the results, what do you do with them? Review your activities. What were the key events and achievements of the reporting period? Were any improvements introduced or new services or products offered? Were there any other significant changes? what inputs were used, what outputs were delivered, and what outcomes were achieved over the reporting period. Is the data objective? How has it been collected? And does it give a complete picture? And is it robust? Are the results balanced, showing both good and bad performance where appropriate? Finally, use the results to communicate and articulate your impact and really tell the story of the positive difference that you have generated. Thanks for taking the time to watch this presentation from the AYCH Creative Entrepreneurs Business Incubation Programme. Please join me for the next in the series. Goodbye.